In honor of April Fool's Day, these are some of the biggest scams of all time. Elizabeth Holmes founded the company Theranos in 2003, claiming her device could run hundreds of tests from a single drop of blood. At its peak, the company was valued at $9 billion, but it was all a lie. The technology never worked, test results endangered patients, and Holmes was convicted of fraud in one of the biggest corporate scandals of all time. In 2023, she was sentenced to 11 years in prison. In 2016 in China, a rideshare scam emerged where drivers deliberately used unsettling profile photos and eerie-looking identities to make passengers uneasy before pickup, hoping they'd cancel the ride. The moment a rider backed out, the driver could collect a cancellation fee without ever showing up, turning their fear into a source of profit. In 2001, a Hooters waitress named Jody Berry won a company contest promising a new Toyota, but when she was blindfolded to receive her prize, her manager handed her a Toyota doll instead. Berry sued for fraud and won, walking away with a real Toyota instead of the Jedi Master. In the 1990s in Nigeria, conman Emmanuel Nuud scammed a Brazilian bank out of $242 million by selling them a completely fake airport project. Posing as a top official, he used forged documents and fake calls to convince executives the deal was real. The fraud ran for years before finally being exposed, and while Nuud was sentenced to prison, much of the money was never recovered. In the 1990s in California, con artist Steve Comazar sold a solar-powered clothes dryer for $49.95 through magazine ads. Customers who ordered it received nothing more than a basic clothesline, realizing too late the product was technically truthful but deliberately misleading. In 2021 in Ohio, a supposed high school football team called Bishop's Sycamore played on ESPN against a top program and was blown out 58-0, raising immediate questions about who the hell they were. It was later revealed the school barely existed, many players were adults, and some even had criminal records. The program itself didn't even have a real campus. After the exposure, the head coach faced legal issues, the program completely collapsed, and the scandal sparked national outrage over how it was possible for this to even happen. In 2001 in the UK, Charles Ingram shocked viewers by winning £1 million on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire despite struggling early on in the game. As the stakes rose, he suddenly began answering difficult questions with confidence, choosing answers that stunned both the audience and the host. Days later, producers reviewed the tapes and discovered his wife and an accomplice had been coughing to signal the correct answers. The prize was revoked, and all three were convicted of fraud. In 1948, a man named Tony Signoroni stomped around a beach in Florida wearing a pair of 30-pound lead shoes. For the next 40 years, he had locals convinced that a 15-foot-tall penguin was waddling around the area. In 1979, billionaire Richard Branson released a hot air balloon shaped like a UFO over the streets of London. The next morning, local police forces were mobilized and even the army was alerted. When the balloon landed, Branson had also paid a little person to walk out dressed as E.T. In 1957, the BBC did a segment on a Swiss family harvesting spaghetti from their spaghetti tree. Since spaghetti was fairly unknown in the UK at the time, hundreds of people contacted the BBC for advice on growing their own spaghetti trees. It's regarded as one of the greatest hoaxes ever from a reputable news network. On April 1, 1975, residents of Sitka, Alaska woke up to the nearby dormant volcano blowing out black smoke. When a Coast Guard pilot went to investigate, he found 70 burning tires and the words April Fool spray painted into the snow. Morbid facts. Simon Cowell once admitted he went so far with Botox and facial fillers that he no longer recognized his own face in photos. After years of cosmetic treatments gradually altered his features into something noticeably unnatural. Experts have suggested the buildup of filler can distort facial structure and even affect how fluid drains from the face, leaving a permanently swollen, tightened look that's essentially impossible to undo. The moment it hit him was when even his own son reacted to how different he looked, forcing him to confront just how far his appearance had drifted from what it once was. In 1912, French brothers Michael and Edmond Navratil, just 4 and 2 years old, were secretly abducted from their mother by their father and brought aboard the Titanic under fake names. When the ship began to sink, their father woke them up, brought them to the final lifeboat, and placed them inside knowing he himself wouldn't survive. The boys made it to New York alone, unable to speak English and with no one knowing who they were, earning them the nickname the Titanic Orphans. Their identities remained a mystery until their mother recognized their photos in a newspaper and traveled across the ocean to reclaim them. This was the mugshot of Ohio grandma Charlene Thompson after she poured hot grease on a woman during an argument. The victim suffered severe burns to her back and arm after the two apparently didn't see eye to eye. Sloths only have enough energy for their weekly toilet trip to the jungle floor. So if their baby ever falls to the ground, they must choose to preserve their energy and leave it to be eaten. A horrific bungee cord accident caused this man's iris to completely collapse. This famous mummy found in Pompeii appeared to be satisfying himself during his final moments in 79 AD. In medieval Germany, a divorcing couple could legally settle their disputes with a marital duel. The man was given a weapon but had to fight out of a hole with one hand tied behind his back, while the woman could move freely with a rock-filled sack but had to wear a weighted suit. If the husband lost, he was beheaded, and if the wife lost, she was buried alive. David Vedder, aka Bubble Boy, was born in 1971 with a severe immune disorder where he basically had no immune system at all, meaning even the most harmless germs could kill him. Because of this, he spent his entire life inside of a bubble and could receive air, water, and food only if it had been sterilized first. At age 12, David received a bone marrow transplant from his sister, the only treatment available that would potentially allow him outside of his bubble. But the marrow sadly contained traces of a dormant virus, and David passed away a few months later. Flash forward to 2001, they made a dark comedy movie starring Jake Gyllenhaal that was inspired by this true story of Bubble Boy. Juan Catalan was put on death row and spent 6 months in prison for the murder of a teenage girl. He was the prime suspect only until his lawyer came across some unused footage from Curb Your Enthusiasm. The footage miraculously proved that Catalan had been at a Dodgers game with his daughter at the time of the murder. This is what a rabies patient looks like when they've already developed symptoms. Rabies causes hydrophobia, where attempting to drink or even just seeing water causes intense clenching throat spasms. This is exactly why rabid animals are often seen foaming at the mouth. Sadly, once a patient reaches this point, there's a 99.9% chance that they will die. Due to the skin's elasticity, it would take 3 full rotations to completely remove the human head. Florida puppeteer Ronald Brown was the host of a kids' TV show in the 1980s called Joy Junction on the Christian Network. But he was later found to be a vicious child predator who owned tons of CP and often fantasized in online chat rooms about kidnapping, abusing, murdering, and cannibalizing children. He was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison in 2012. Jared Fogle was the face of Subway throughout the early 2000s after losing 275 pounds thanks to eating only Subway for a year straight. But in 2015, the FBI completed a 4-year-long surveillance operation to bring him down for owning excessive amounts of CP. They began investigating after Fogle made some disturbing comments about children to a female reporter, who started recording her conversations with him and passing them on to the FBI. In many of those conversations, he bragged about touching children and even asked her if he could put cameras in her kids' bedrooms.
What if we put a camera in your kids' room? Wouldn't that be okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah? Would you rather have in your son or your daughter's room?
After 4 long years of the woman putting up with Jared's phone calls and disgusting remarks about children, the FBI finally had enough evidence to take him down.
I don't like all ages. That's the thing. I like all of them, you know?
Well, what makes it different? I mean, from one age to another, why does...
Well, it depends who's ready for what. And, you know, who's going to give you the glance, you know what I mean?
Fogle was sentenced to 15 years in prison after pleading guilty to his heinous crimes involving kids and owning more than 5 terabytes of CP. In 1987, actor Sean Penn spent 60 days in prison for reckless driving and assaulting someone on the set of the film Colors. During his imprisonment, a guard delivered a note to him from fellow inmate serial killer Richard Ramirez. In the note, Ramirez asked for Penn's autograph and said that he should assault the same person again. Penn responded with his own note saying that he hoped that Richard would be executed as soon as possible. And the serial killer didn't write back. In 2017, this Rohingya Muslim man carried his elderly and immobile parents in baskets to escape Burma's death squads. He carried them for over 100 miles in his bare feet before safely reaching Bangladesh 7 days later. Many consider Brazilian serial killer Pedro Rodrigues to be the perfect psychopath because of who he chose to murder. Starting at the age of 14, he's killed over 70 people in total, specifically targeting drug dealers, murderers, and rapists. He spent 42 years in prison before being released in 2018 on good behavior, and now he's a YouTuber. This is the progression of mugshots of a man who sank deeper and deeper into a life of drugs and crime. Matthew Medlin is a schizophrenic who sadly never got his life together after becoming hooked on meth. The male Babirusa pig can grow tusks so long that they curve backwards and slowly kill him by impaling his skull. The purpose of this medical device will make you shiver. It's a restraining device used to immobilize infants during circumcisions. After 12 years of torture in a Hawaiian circus, this poor elephant named Tyke managed to escape, injuring staff on his way out. He then went on an all-out rampage before police shot him 86 times, eventually killing him. In 1957, a 42,000-pound hydrogen bomb, one of the most powerful of its time, was accidentally dropped by a bomber near Albuquerque, New Mexico. Luckily, it landed in an uninhabited area, so no one was injured or killed. When Steven Tyler was 27 years old, he started a relationship with a 14-year-old girl. He took her on the road with her, got her addicted to drugs, got her pregnant, and forced her to have an abortion when she was only 16. Anton syndrome is a rare psychological condition that can affect people who suddenly go blind. They are unaware of their blindness and outright deny it, since their brain generates false visual images, causing them to believe that they can still see. At some point during the Middle Ages, it was believed that sperm produced by the left testicle resulted in having girls. To ensure having a son, men would have it removed. In 2021, Tennessee man Tyson Gilbert cut off his own tallywhacker and threw it out the window as he was being chased by police. He allegedly claimed that voices on the radio told him that doing so would save the world. The animal that causes the most deaths in the US annually is deer. This is due to them blindly leaping into roadways, resulting in an estimated 200 deaths per year. The runner-up is bees, wasps, and hornets, with right around 60 deaths caused annually. Lolong was the Guinness Book of World Records holder for the largest saltwater crocodile in captivity. But the 20-foot-long, 2,400-pound beast died of fungal infection and stress 2 years after being captured. Tennessee man James Washington was always the prime suspect of a 1995 murder, but there was never sufficient evidence to charge him. That was until 2012 when he was having a heart attack and confessed to the murder because he thought he was on his deathbed. But he ended up surviving and was convicted based on this confession, which he later tried to take back. The creator of Rocket Raccoon is institutionalized due to brain damage from a hit and run in 1992. When Marvel made the Guardians of the Galaxy, they offered a compensation package that ensured care for the rest of his life. After he recovered from a series of severe health issues, Richard Pananyan's family sacrificed a lamb to God in hopes of keeping Richard healthy. But sadly, just 5 days later, Richard died in a bizarre car accident. He was ejected from his vehicle and landed on top of a highway street sign. Here's a mother and daughter from the Hmong Bitu tribe in 1930. They believed that the elongation of the head would allow the brain to grow larger, thus increasing intelligence. In 2013, Erica Negrelli suffered a seizure while pregnant and died on the way to the hospital. Her daughter Elena was born healthy via an emergency C-section. But after the operation, Erica's heart miraculously started beating again. She was in a coma for 5 days before waking up and making a full recovery. After being shot in the head by a drunk man and enduring an 8-year coma, policeman Gary Dockery suddenly woke up. He started talking enthusiastically, recognizing old friends and remembering old events from the past. But by the next day, he could no longer speak and slipped back into the same coma, never to wake up again. During a photo shoot, a model in New York City was distracted by the first plane hitting the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001. Daniel Villegas was 16 years old when he was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of 2 teenagers in 1995. However, he later claimed that he had nothing to do with the killings and was coerced into confessing by detectives. Here's a video of him finally being found innocent after serving 20 years in prison.
The state of Texas versus Daniel Villegas. We, the jury, find the defendant Daniel Villegas not guilty of...
Between all the money and fame, Taylor Swift has faced some significant challenges with obsessive fans. She's received thousands of letters containing death threats and has had her properties broken into dozens of times. The threats have become so persistent that her security team has to install facial recognition software at every venue she performs at in order to specifically distinguish between her known stalkers and her fans. Before he was caught, 6'9" serial killer Edmund Kemper became friends with the very police officers investigating his murders. Calling him Big Ed, they would often socialize with him at the local bar and never would have suspected him. When he initially confessed, they thought he was pulling a prank. In In 2013, two armed men wearing masks broke into Texas man Rogelio Andaverde's home and abducted him right in front of his petrified wife. She was convinced he was murdered until he returned home a few days later completely unharmed. Turns out he staged the abduction himself so that he could go out drinking with some friends. In 2018, 18-year-old Cameron Herron was street racing against his friend before crashing his Mustang into a mother and toddler, killing them both. Here's his reaction to his sentencing of 24 years when he only expected a maximum of 10.
Court's going to adjudicate the defendant guilty, sentence him to 9 years in the Florida State Prison. On count 2, same charge. Court will adjudicate the defendant guilty, sentence him to 15 years Florida State Prison, and that'll run consecutive to count 1, for a total 24 years Florida State Prison.
Nevada's Clown Motel shares its land with an abandoned cemetery, where most of the 300 people buried there either died in a mine fire or from a 1902 plague. In the year 2000, all 4 members of the Sedagaya family were stabbed and murdered in their own home. Afterwards, the killer remained in their house for several hours, eating their food, using their toilet without flushing, logging into the family computer, and even taking a nap on their couch. But despite an extensive effort, the killer was never identified. These are the incriminating Google searches that Brian Walsh made before and after he murdered his wife Anna.
4:55 a.m. on January 1st, he searched how long before a body starts to smell. At 4:58 a.m., how to stop a body from decomposing. At 5:20 a.m., he searched how to embalm a body. At 5:47 a.m., 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to. At 6:25 a.m. on the 1st, how long for someone to be missing to inherit. At 6:34 a.m. on the 1st, can you throw away body parts? At 9:29 a.m., what does formaldehyde do? At 9:34 a.m. on the 1st, how long does DNA last? At 9:59 a.m., can identification be made on partial remains? At 11:34 a.m., dismemberment and the best ways to dispose of a body. At 11:44, how to clean blood in the wooden floor. At 11:56 on the 1st, luminol to detect blood. At 1:08, what happens when you put body parts in ammonia? At 1:21 p.m., is it better to throw crime scene clothes away or wash them?
In 2014, California grandmother Cynthia C. DeBaca shot her son-in-law Gerard Eustachio 15 times on her own birthday. She gleefully admitted to the murder while being interrogated, claiming that he was abusive to her family. This was her disturbing reaction to being informed that he didn't survive.
He's dead.
He's dead, man.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh boy, oh boy.
You don't feel bad about it?
No.
Would you do it again?
Yes.
Here's a heartbreaking clip of the evil grandmother being confronted by her daughter Laura, who described her husband Gerard as a loving and kind-hearted person.
Oh, God. I wanted to.
Oh my God. 13 years I wanted to go get him.
Lastly, Cynthia was confronted by her devastated granddaughter who could barely make it into the room.
Oh, honey. Kiss me.
No, you killed my dad.
Cynthia was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. U.S. Navy veteran Dennis Avner was once told by a Native American chief to follow the ways of the tiger. But he ended up taking this to the extreme by undergoing 14 surgical procedures to completely transform himself into a big cat. Black Friday in 2008, 34-year-old New Yorker Jim Ty DeMore had only been working at Walmart for a week when he was asked to use his 6'5" body as a barrier against a crowd of 2,000 people. Tragically, he ended up dying after being trampled by the crowd as soon as doors opened. The shoppers showed zero concern for his death and instead complained about waiting too long for his body to be moved. Last August, 71-year-old Richard Moore disappeared while hiking in the mountains of Colorado. 72 days later, a local hunter stumbled upon the missing man's body. Incredibly, by his side was his loyal Jack Russell Terrier named Finney, who had survived for months in the wilderness and refused to abandon her owner's body. Located in the top floors of the North Tower, the investment firm Cantor Fitzgerald lost all 658 of its employees who came to work on 9/11. But by a twist of fate, the company's CEO was late that morning because he had to take his son Kyle to his first day of kindergarten. Faced with such devastating losses, including his brother, his best friend, and nearly 2/3 of his employee base, Howard Lutnick initially felt as though he had no choice but to shut down the company. But he eventually had a change in mindset and began to rally workers at other branches in order to keep the company alive. He promised families of his deceased employees a 25% share of future Cantor profits for the next 5 years, as well as guaranteed health insurance for the next 10 years, eventually paying out a total of $180 million. In the 22 years since 9/11, Lutnick has completely rebuilt his company to 10 times the size it was, with 12,000 employees worldwide. He says he's most proud of the fact that his company now employs more than 60 people who had parents that died on 9/11. Lutnick says the lesson that all of this has taught him is, you just gotta live and enjoy each and every day of your life. Michael Jordan's father was tragically murdered by 2 teenagers who were attempting to steal his car in July of 1993. The incident shocked the sports world and had a profound impact on Michael, who temporarily retired from basketball to pursue a career in baseball because his father had always wanted him to. Around 500 BC, a judge in the Persian Empire named Sisamnes was skinned alive for being incredibly corrupt. The king later ordered for the judge's skin to be made into the chair that his son Otanes would sit on as the new successor, to remind of his father's corruption and to ensure fairness in all of his rulings. In 1987, a Pakistani child named Iqbal Masih was sold into bonded labor at the age of 4. For 7 days a week, he was forced to work 12 hours per day and was only paid pennies on the hour. At age 10, he escaped from the carpet factory he worked at and went on to free over 3,000 children from slavery. He went on tour around Pakistan to raise awareness about child bonded labor until he was assassinated at the age of 12. British rapper Sian Brofton took multiple videos of his girlfriend during the 6 hours she was overdosing on the psychedelic drug 2CP that he gave to her. A video showed her screaming for her mother in horror while Sian casually plays with a fidget spinner and calls her a drama queen. He was sentenced to 8.5 years for manslaughter, but this decision was overturned just a few months later. American man John Minock was the heaviest person in recorded history, weighing an astounding 1,400 pounds at his peak. He then managed to lose over 900 pounds, only to regain it all back later on. In 2014, a 57-year-old Japanese man named Yasuo Takamatsu learned how to scuba dive, specifically to look for his wife's remains after she was swept away by the 2011 tsunami that claimed over 20,000 lives. He said her last email to him was, "I want to go home," and he's determined to make that happen. As of 2023, he still remains searching routinely and hasn't lost hope. In 2005, Ohio man Brian Peppers was arrested for the sexual assault of a female child. The police photograph of him quickly went viral since Peppers suffered from a rare developmental condition, leaving many people to believe that the photo was fake. But it ended up being completely legitimate, and Brian passed away in 2012 at the age of 43 due to complications with excessive drinking. In 2014, English mother Sarah Sands discovered that her 77-year-old neighbor had sexually abused her 3 sons. After authorities released him and let him back in the same apartment near Sarah, she murdered him by stabbing him 8 times with a 12-inch blade. It was later revealed that the man was living under a fake identity and had previously abused 24 other young boys over the years. Due to these circumstances, the judge only gave Sarah 3.5 years in prison. Before filming The Empire Strikes Back, Mark Hamill was in a car accident that nearly killed him and required reconstructive facial surgery using part of his ear. Hamill thought the injuries would ruin his career, but they were explained in the movie when Luke gets attacked by a wampa. In 1960, an Australian father won $3 million in the lottery, so his photo was plastered all over the news. Shortly afterwards, his 8-year-old son was kidnapped for ransom and eventually murdered. This resulted in drastic changes to anonymity laws for Australian lottery winners. This Incan girl was found perfectly preserved at the base of an Argentinian volcano. She's believed to have been sacrificed in a religious ritual that took place around the year 1500. In the ritual, she was heavily drugged and placed in a tiny chamber beneath the ground where she was left to die. Her frozen body has been hailed as one of the best preserved mummies ever found, since her hair, skin, and clothes all remain perfectly intact. Howard Stern's popular guest Lester Green, aka Beetlejuice, suffers from multiple developmental disorders including dwarfism and microcephaly. His lesser-known sister Erica also suffered from the same conditions but sadly passed away in 2020 from an undisclosed health problem. Computer genius Daniel Lewis is considered to be the first victim to die on 9/11. He was fatally stabbed by a hijacker on American Airlines Flight 11 after trying to stop the hijacking. Akamai Technologies, the company he co-founded, is now worth over $17 billion. An average of 25,000 people die from hunger-related causes every day. That's about one person dying from hunger every 4 seconds. Ashley Martinson was abused by several of her mother's boyfriends throughout her childhood. The day after her 17th birthday, she killed her stepfather with a shotgun before stabbing her mother 30 times to death. She was sentenced to 23 years in prison, but says she feels safer and happier now than she ever did at home. In 2011, a Swedish man named Richard Handel was arrested for trying to split atoms in his kitchen. He was charged with unauthorized possession of nuclear material, but said he just wanted to see if it was possible to split atoms at home. About 100 Americans choke to death on pen caps each year, but that number used to be much higher before manufacturers started putting holes in the caps. According to experts, the average American will walk past a murderer about 36 times throughout their life. A death row inmate in Tennessee discovered that there were untested fingerprints that were found at the original crime scene. In a last-ditch effort to prove his innocence, he successfully petitioned the courts to run the tests. They were found to be his own fingerprints, confirming his guiltiness. Known for her role in Throw Mama from the Train, actress Anne Ramsey was in severe pain during the entire production. She had parts of her tongue and jaw removed during surgery for throat cancer, resulting in her slurred speech throughout the movie. She was nominated for an Oscar 6 months before dying of the cancer. Ant corpses release a chemical when they die that tells the other ants in the colony to dispose of them. In the 1950s, a Harvard scientist once recreated this chemical and dropped it on a live ant. Its ant friends kept carrying it to the graveyard no matter how much it struggled to return. The original owner of Macy's, Isidore Straus, and his wife Ida both died on the Titanic. The husband had a chance to join his wife on a lifeboat, but stayed behind to give his spot to a child. Refusing to leave her husband behind, Ida decided to leave the lifeboat as well. They were last seen holding hands on the deck and were portrayed in the movie as the couple who were embracing each other as the ship went down. Here's a 2006 photo of Mike Tyson shaking the hand of Dale Hausner, a Phoenix serial killer who took the lives of 8 people via drive-by shootings in the mid-2000s. A few days after Tyson met up with Hausner, who was pretending to be a sports writer, police showed up at the gym and informed Mike about Hausner's awful crimes. The boxer later said he never suspected anything wrong with Hausner, describing him as a nice little guy. An 8-year-old girl once found a 4-leaf clover and gave it to her dad for good luck. When her father died, she found out he kept it in his pocket every day for 20 straight years. In 2017, Las Vegas police arrested Shane Schindler, the prime suspect in the sledgehammer murders of 2 homeless men. Police set up a sting operation in which they disguised a mannequin as a homeless man and left it on the street. The photo on the right shows Schindler bashing the mannequin with a sledgehammer, thus proving he was the killer. Dennis Rodman was once on a cruise with his girlfriend when they wanted to try something different in bed. So she suggested for Dennis to run and jump inside of her while she was laying down unclothed. This resulted in Dennis shattering his member and pouring blood all over the bed. It was the first of 3 times that he would break his pecker, since once you break it the first time, it becomes way easier to break again. In 2009, escaped spree robber Jeffrey Manchester built a secret hideout inside of a Toys R Us. He lived there for 6 months, surviving off of kid snacks and watching DVDs to pass the time. In September of 1983, Soviet military officer Stanislav Petrov received a message that the US had launched 5 nuclear missiles that were headed for Moscow. He could have launched a retaliatory strike, but refused to because his gut instinct said it was a false alarm. Turns out the computer detection system was simply malfunctioning, and he had saved the world from a nuclear war. Playboy model Anna Nicole Smith didn't receive a single penny when her 90-year-old billionaire husband died. Oil tycoon J. Howard Marshall never included her in his will and left his $1.6 billion estate to one of his sons. Anna was almost completely broke by the time she died of an accidental overdose in 2007. 17-year-old Liam Ashley's own parents pressed criminal charges against him for using their car without permission. They also refused to pay his bail so that he would be sent to prison and hopefully learn his lesson. While being transported in a prisoner van, Liam was viciously attacked by a dangerous offender and killed. In the 1980s, child serial killer Robert Black murdered 4 little girls and assaulted many more. He was finally caught after a neighbor reported seeing a young girl being driven away in his white van. Coincidentally, the police officer who opened the van door found his own daughter tied up and gagged in the back seat. The killer was apprehended and sentenced to life in prison. Frank Fritz of American Pickers left the show in 2020 to focus on his health following a feud with co-star Mike Wolfe. Sadly, he suffered a debilitating stroke just last year and has been living under a temporary guardianship ever since. In 2008, suspected serial killer Ricky Simmons was found dead of heat stroke in the trunk of his ex-girlfriend's car. Investigators believe Simmons was waiting in the trunk to ambush and murder his ex-girlfriend, but he became locked in the vehicle. A 62-year-old Chinese woman who had a constant runny nose for decades was suddenly suffering from headaches and breathing problems. An x-ray soon revealed that she had a bullet lodged in her head near her nostril. She then remembered when she was 14 years old, she was going for a walk and felt a sudden stinging pain in her temple. She started bleeding but thought she'd only been hit by a pebble, so her family simply patched her up and didn't find it necessary to take her to the hospital. Apparently, she'd been shot in the head. Here are some people who survived the impossible. A boy born with just 2% of his brain completely defied doctors' predictions after his brain grew to 80% of the average size. Doctors had told his parents to terminate the pregnancy not once, not twice, but 5 times. The chief baker on the Titanic, Charles Joe Finn, survived in icy waters for 2 hours before he was rescued. He claimed he didn't feel cold at all thanks to how hammered he was from all the whiskey he was drinking that night. In 1999, skydiver Joan Murray's parachute malfunctioned, causing her to fall 14,000 feet to the ground. But miraculously, Joan survived the fall only because she landed directly onto a mound of fire ants. Doctors believe that being stung over 200 times by the ants released a surge of adrenaline that kept her heart beating. In 1915, a distraught woman who was late to her sister's funeral demanded to see her one last time. So the coffin was raised out of the ground, and when it was opened, the dead woman sat up and smiled. She went on to live for another 47 years. In 2020, Tyson Steele survived for 3 weeks in sub-zero temperatures after his remote cabin burned down in Alaska. He built himself a snow cave to sleep in for the first few nights, before using a spare tarp and scrap timber to build a makeshift shelter around his still-burning stove. This footage shows him being rescued after 23 days of being stranded. In the year 2000, a man named Kevin Hines survived a jump from the Golden Gate Bridge but broke his spine on impact. However, he was miraculously saved by a wild sea lion who kept him afloat until the Coast Guard could reach him. In 2018, a woman from Canada was shot in the chest from point-blank range. But amazingly, her breast implant deflected the bullet, resulting in her only injury being a fractured rib. In 2015, Texas father George Pickering saved his son's life when doctors wrongly declared him brain dead and wanted to take him off life support. He barricaded himself in the hospital room with a gun and had a 3-hour standoff with the SWAT team until his son squeezed his hand. The son ended up making a full recovery. A 42-year-old Russian fisherman was viciously attacked by a brown bear in 2014, but he was spared when the ringtone his granddaughter installed onto his phone suddenly went off. Justin Bieber's song Baby miraculously sent the bear running back into the woods like a bitch. Titanic survivor Dick Williams spent over 6 hours waist deep in freezing waters before being rescued. Doctors wanted to amputate both of his legs, but he refused because he wanted to continue playing tennis. He made a full recovery and went on to become a U.S. tennis champion in mixed doubles. In 2014, 3-year-old Karina Chikatova survived in the Siberian wilderness for 11 days with nobody other than her dog. She ate wild berries, drank from a river, and curled up with her dog for warmth. She was saved when her dog managed to find her village and guide rescuers toward her. In 1915, Mexican man Wenceslao Moguel was sentenced to execution and shot 9 times by a firing squad. But he managed to survive every shot, including the coup de grace, a final shot to the head at point-blank range to ensure death. He went on to live for another 70 years, finally dying in 1976. Here are some stories of feral children who were raised by animals. In 1986, 3-year-old Oksana Malaya was left outside by her parents, so she walked to a nearby shed inhabited by wild dogs. When she was rescued 6 years later, she growled, walked on all fours, sniffed her food before eating it, and barked exactly like a dog. Today, she lives in a mental hospital and has the social capabilities of a 5-year-old. A Russian boy named Vanya Yudin was raised in a room surrounded by birds and cages because his mother thought that he was a pet. When he was rescued in 2008 at the age of 7, he could only communicate by chirping and flapping his arms. Jeannie Wiley was locked up in a room for 13 years by her father, who wanted to protect her from the outside world. He kept her tied up in a straitjacket and never spoke to her, only barking at her like a wild dog if she made any noise. When she was finally rescued, doctors said she had the cognitive abilities of a 1-year-old baby. Despite intensive efforts, Jeannie faced significant challenges in learning language and was eventually institutionalized for life. These are some of the worst medical mistakes of all time. In 2007, Joseph Swain from Delaware filed a lawsuit against his doctors after a horrific surgical mix-up. An apparently botched colostomy left him urinating out of his ass and pooping from his schlong. In 2021, an 82-year-old man from Austria had the wrong leg amputated during surgery. The patient was told he would still need his other leg amputated as well. In 2012, 88-year-old Ida Maciel died after nurses accidentally injected chicken soup into her veins instead of her feeding tube. In 1847, a doctor performed an amputation so quickly that he accidentally amputated his assistant's fingers as well. Both the patient and assistant died from sepsis, while a spectator apparently died from shock. This resulted in the only known procedure with a 300% mortality rate. A British Marine had a leg tattoo of Liverpool's motto, "You'll never walk alone." But after a major injury in Afghanistan, that leg was amputated, and the surgeon had to cut the tattoo, so it now read, "You'll never walk." This is why you should never make eye contact with a gorilla. The average silverback gorilla is 4 to 9 times stronger than the average human male. They can deadlift 1,800 pounds, and their grip can crush the skull of a crocodile. Luckily, gorillas in captivity and in the wild have been known to be very peaceful creatures that will only attack when provoked. But this doesn't mean there haven't been a few isolated cases of stupid people pushing their luck. In 2007, a woman frequently visited Germany's Rotterdam Zoo and spent a lot of time smiling at the male gorilla Bokito. Zoo employees warned her many times about making eye contact with him, since greater apes typically interpret eye contact as a display of aggression. But the woman claimed she and Bokito shared a special bond, so she ignored these warnings. Until one day, Bokito decided he had enough when some kids were throwing rocks at him, so he leaped over the water ditch that separated him from visitors. He immediately went straight for the woman and brutally attacked her, dragging her around for hundreds of feet and inflicting numerous broken bones as well as more than 100 bite wounds. The woman narrowly survived the attack, spending months in the hospital and undergoing several reconstructive surgeries. These are some morbid facts about Stephen King. When he was a young boy, Stephen witnessed one of his best friends get struck and killed by a train, but he has no recollection of the event. King's family said that after leaving to play with the boy, he returned home speechless and in shock. Many believe this event may have psychologically inspired some of King's darker works, though he refuses to comment on it. In 1999, King was struck by a minivan and nearly killed by the distracted driver. Stephen later bought the van so that he could destroy it, and the driver of the van happened to die on King's birthday the next year, September 21st. The greatest horror writer in history claims that he constantly lives in fear. His long list of phobias include flying, snakes, rats, spiders, squishy things, deformities, death, closed-in spaces, and the dark. King would do so much cocaine while writing that he had to stuff cotton up his nose to prevent blood from dripping on his typewriter. There are various books that he doesn't even remember writing, including the 1981 classic Cujo. Here are some morbidly wholesome facts about Robin Williams. When Sharon Osbourne was sick in bed with cancer and giving up, Ozzy asked Robin Williams to come visit. Robin randomly hopped in her sick bed, and her family instantly went from crying to laughing hysterically. Robin cheered her up so much that she went back to chemo the very next day. When Christopher Reeve was left paralyzed after a horse riding accident, Robin was one of the first people to visit him in the hospital. He came in dressed as a doctor and told Reeve he was there to give him a rectal exam, causing him to laugh for the first time in weeks. Robin had a clause in his contract that required at least 10 homeless people to be hired in every movie he acted in. Throughout his career, he helped over 1,500 homeless people get jobs. When Robin Williams first met Coco the gorilla in 2001, he made her smile for the first time in 6 months. When Robin died suddenly in 2014, Coco overheard the news and said the word cry in sign language. Moments of sweet karma. This young Florida man broke into his neighbor's house while wielding a knife and threatened to murder the old man. But he apparently had no idea that 72-year-old Frank Cordy was a former boxer, Marine, and hand-to-hand combat instructor. When the burglar lunged at him with the knife, Frank immediately put him in the hospital. On New Year's Eve in 2011, a suicide bomber planned on blowing up Moscow's Red Square with a mobile phone bomb. But her plan failed miserably when she received a spam text wishing her a happy new year. This caused the bomb to detonate while she was still at the safe house, and she was the only person that died. Tigers are some of the most vengeful animals on the planet and will take revenge on anyone who has wronged them. In 1997, a Russian poacher learned this the hard way when he shot a Siberian tiger and left him for dead before stealing part of his meal. The tiger later found the poacher's cabin and waited 12 hours for him to arrive back before tearing him to shreds. These are some of the oldest animals in recorded history. Harriet the Galapagos tortoise was collected in 1835 by Charles Darwin while he was discovering evolution. She died in 2010 at the age of 175 as a beloved member of Steve Irwin's Australia Zoo. The average lifespan of koi fish in Japan is typically around 40 years. But born in 1751, a koi fish named Hanako far exceeded this average, reportedly dying at the age of 226 in the year 1977. The Greenland shark is believed to be the oldest living vertebrate species in the world. This specimen is believed to be over 400 years old, meaning it was roaming the depths before the Pilgrims entered America. But none of these compare to the tragic story of Ming. In 2006, a team of scientists in Iceland were freezing clams in order to study the effects of climate change. But they ended up killing the oldest known animal in the world, a 507-year-old ocean quahog clam named Ming. Morbid facts about Michael Jackson. Let's start with his father. As a child, Michael's father Joseph would constantly torment him for his appearance, often calling him Fat Nose. Michael went on to have 4 rhinoplasties and was insecure about his appearance for his entire life. According to his former doctor, Michael's father also chemically castrated him when he was a young boy. He reportedly did this so that Michael would maintain his high-pitched singing voice into adulthood. On one occasion in the 1960s, Joe wanted to teach his kids a lesson about leaving their windows open at night. So when little Michael was asleep, his father climbed through his window wearing a mask and screamed at him. From that point on, Michael would have recurring nightmares about being kidnapped from his bedroom. But the alleged abuse didn't stop there. Joe would hold onto a belt while the Jackson 5 rehearsed, ready to strike at any moment if one of his kids made a mistake. Michael was so terrified of his father that he would sometimes throw up just from being in his presence. Michael even once said that he felt the safest while performing on stage because his father wouldn't be able to beat him in front of a crowd. During an interview shortly before his death, Michael admitted that he would often talk to child mannequins just to feel less alone. He would also frequently cry at the sight of kids playing in the park because it was something that Michael would never experience himself. Here's a 1985 prediction of what Michael would look like in the year 2000 versus what he actually ended up looking like. As a result of a combination of skin conditions and body dysmorphia, Jackson went through nearly 100 procedures over 30 years trying to achieve his idea of perfection. Michael originally had a meeting scheduled at the top of one of the Twin Towers on 9/11. But after talking with his mom on the phone all night, he overslept and missed the appointment. In 2003, a supermarket was once shut down so that Michael could live out his lifelong dream of shopping like an ordinary person. All the other shoppers were either actors or his friends, and they paid no attention to Michael. He played around in the store like a child and even compared the experience to going to Disneyland. In 2002, Michael was staying at a hotel in Berlin when he dangled his 9-month-old son blanket over his 4th-floor balcony. Jackson claimed he was simply excited and wanted to show off his baby to the fans below, but the media was quick to criticize Michael's parenting skills and life-threatening behavior. Jackson later apologized, stating that it was a mistaken judgment and that he didn't mean to endanger his son. Blanket is now 21 years old and rarely makes public appearances. Michael Jackson once paid a witch doctor $150,000 to put a curse on Steven Spielberg. The expensive ritual involved the slaughtering of dozens of animals, including 42 cows, all because Spielberg didn't give Michael the role of Peter Pan in his 1991 film Hook. The director had previously promised Michael the part, but decided to make the movie a comedy instead of a musical and went with Robin Williams instead. This was devastating for Michael since he famously had an obsession with Peter Pan and the idea of never growing up. In 1988, Michael purchased a private amusement park that he would name Neverland Ranch and live at for 25 years. He invited children from all over the world to his home, typically as charitable events for kids in need. But in 2003, Michael was charged with multiple counts of essaying a minor, and Neverland Ranch was searched extensively by police. Despite being acquitted of all charges 2 years later, Michael never returned to his home. Proof that animals are evolving. This video from an Ontario aquarium shows the incredible intelligence of an orca whale. He spits out some fish that he was given for food and sinks back into the water in front of a flock of seagulls. When one of the birds eventually takes the bait, the orca immediately grabs it, earning himself a much bigger meal. Here's a video of a Miami Zoo gorilla telling visitors in sign language that they're not allowed to feed him. Elephants in Thailand have learned to exploit their right-of-way by forcing sugarcane trucks to stop so that they can steal a snack. This goes to show why elephants are considered to be one of the most intelligent animals in the world. Archaeologists have discovered dwarf crocodiles living in remote caves in the African country of Gabon. After living in complete darkness for a few generations, their skin has turned orange and they are almost completely blind. These weird cave crocodiles may be in the process of evolving into an entirely new species. Here are some people who became millionaires within a few seconds. An Indonesian man became an instant millionaire when a meteorite worth $2 million crashed into his home. The rock is an extremely rare variety that's estimated to be around 4.5 billion years old. In 2013, PayPal accidentally credited $93 quadrillion to Pennsylvania man Chris Reynolds. Unfortunately, he didn't withdraw it before they noticed the error, making him the richest man in the history of the world for only a few minutes. In 1998, Philip Ozerski was attending a Cardinals baseball game at Busch Stadium in St. Louis. It would turn out to be the game where Mark McGwire hit his record-setting 70th home run of the season, and Philip caught the ball. But since McGwire refused to meet him, Ozerski didn't give the ball back. Instead, he later sold it at auction for around $3 million. When a Filipino fisherman's anchor got stuck on a rock, he decided to take it home with him as a good luck charm. He kept it under his bed for 10 years until his house burned down in a fire. He soon found out that it was actually the largest pearl ever found, valued at right around $100 million. Never tell me the odds. While filming the final scene of the movie Kingpin, where Bill Murray's character bowls 3 strikes in a row, Bill Murray actually did bowl 3 strikes in a row. His celebration along with the crowd's roaring applause were both genuine reactions. Enzo Ferrari, the founder of the Ferrari company, died on August 14, 1988. Just 1 month later, on October 15th, Arsenal soccer player Mesut Ozil was born. Famous Austrian composer and painter Arnold Schoenberg had extreme triskaidekaphobia, a fear of the number 13. He ended up dying on Friday the 13th at the age of 76. 7 plus 6 equals 13. In 1913, a 12-year-old black girl named Sarah Rector was given land deemed unsuitable for farming. But it turned out to be rich with oil, and she became a millionaire overnight. She was known as the richest colored girl in the world, and Oklahoma legislation even made an effort to have her legally declared white. In the 1990s, the FBI knew there was a double agent within the Bureau, and they assigned Robert Hansen the task of finding him. It was later discovered that Hansen was the double agent they were looking for, and had been working with the KGB since 1979 in what was possibly the worst intelligence disaster in U.S. history. He was serving out 15 life sentences without the possibility of parole until he died earlier this year. An electric company in Arkansas was forced to post this PSA after somebody took out a power line with an unbelievable arrow shot. This 3,000-year-old clay pig was found 2 years ago at the Lian ruins of China. Internet users immediately pointed out that it looked exactly like the pigs from Angry Birds. New Jersey grandma Patricia DeMoro walked up to a craps table with $100 at an Atlantic City casino. Over 4 hours later, she'd set the world record for craps rolls at 154, shattering the previous record of 118. Her winnings were not disclosed to the public, but the odds of accomplishing what she did were about 1 in 1.56 trillion. While filming the first fight scene in the movie Troy, in which he played mythological hero Achilles, Brad Pitt ruptured his Achilles tendon. The ironic injury halted filming for several weeks while the actor recovered. In 1971, Edwin Robinson from Maine suddenly went blind and nearly deaf after a truck accident. But 9 years later, he was struck by lightning in his backyard, and his vision and hearing were both miraculously restored. Legendary authors C.S. Lewis and Aldous Huxley both died on November 22, 1963, but their deaths were overshadowed by a far more noteworthy death that occurred on that same day: the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. In 2021, a Canadian woman was asleep in her bed when she was suddenly awoken by an explosive bang from her ceiling. She jumped out of bed and turned on the light, discovering a meteorite nestled between her pillows. She was inches away from becoming only the second person in recorded history to be struck by a meteorite, and likely would have been the first to be killed by one. Ancient discoveries. The largest known Easter Island statue was carved but never dug out from the ground. It would have stood at 72 feet tall and weighed up to 360,000 pounds. With the largest standing statue being only 33 feet tall, it's likely that this one was simply far too big to erect. Discovered in northern England, here's a 2,000-year-old toy sword that likely belonged to a child from ancient Rome. In the summer of 2018 in Crete, a farmer was trying to park in the shade of an olive tree on his property. But suddenly the ground gave out and he discovered an ancient Minoan tomb that hadn't been touched in 3,400 years. Dating back to 1100 AD, the Zhangong Patriarch is a gold-painted papier-mâché statue that was stolen from a Chinese temple in 1995. Just a couple of years ago, researchers decided to scan it and discovered the statue contained the mummified body of a famous Chinese monk. In 2003, a 500-year-old skeleton measuring 6 inches long was found in Chile's Atacama Desert. Due to its elongated skull and rather developed bones considering its size, the specimen was initially rumored to be an alien. But after extensive testing, scientists determined that it was more likely the skeleton of a stillborn human girl that had close to 70 different genetic mutations. A 2,000-year-old loaf of bread made just before the eruption of Pompeii was discovered in 2018. It still has an ancient Roman bread stamp impressed on it, which bakeries were required to do to prevent fraud. This 6-foot-long monster megalodon tooth was found off the coast of North Carolina. The North Carolina coast happens to be a known hotspot for prehistoric tooth findings. Archaeologists have rediscovered the ancient Egyptian city of Thanis after it was lost to a flood over 1,000 years ago. Much of it remains to be discovered as divers are still finding new treasures from its ruins each year. These are some of the craziest things that were recently discovered. Just last year, archaeologists in Lima, Peru came across a mummy that was bound in ropes in an underground tomb. It's estimated to be up to 1,200 years old, as rope binding was a traditional part of the local funeral process around that time. A linguistics study recently found that winter workers in Australia have started to develop an entirely new accent. This is a result of them being isolated and in regular contact with only each other for several months. In the early 1900s, British explorer Percy Fawcett theorized about an ancient lost city called Z that was somewhere in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. But he was never able to prove this myth since he vanished in 1925 during his third attempt to find the city. However, thanks to recent LiDAR technology, scientists have been able to digitally peel back part of the Amazon rainforest, revealing an extensive urban settlement that was heavily populated for many centuries. These areas are very difficult to excavate since they're very deep in the jungle, but scientists believe that within the next 10 to 20 years, our historical perception of the Amazon will completely change. Just last month, archaeologists examining a newly discovered ancient Egyptian cemetery found this lid on the coffin of an ancient priestess. It's clear that whomever arranged for her funeral wasn't prepared to pay top dollar for her burial. The internet has also pointed out that the image closely resembles Marge Simpson, even though the coffin is more than 3,000 years old. Last year, a perfectly intact 1,500-year-old arrow was discovered nestled between some rocks in Norway. The research team thinks it was encased in ice, then transported downslope as the ice melted. An amateur diver exploring shallow waters near Israel recently discovered this 900-year-old iron sword. Experts believe it belonged to a crusader knight before he lost it overboard during a fierce battle in the 11th century. An incredible discovery was recently made during renovations at a church in Naples, Italy. Behind a 16th century painting called Life of San Severo, workers found a hidden painting depicting St. George slaying a dragon. Scientists have found an 18,000-year-old mummified puppy in Siberian permafrost with its teeth, nose, and whiskers still intact. DNA testing has not been able to determine whether Dogor is a wolf or dog, since it's possible that he represents a common ancestor to both. Last summer, a massive drought in Texas uncovered some fossilized footprints at Dinosaur Valley State Park, most likely belonging to a theropod called Acrocanthosaurus. The prints had been covered by water and sediment for over 113 million years. This incredible video shows archaeologists opening an ancient Egyptian sarcophagus in front of a crowd of people. The coffin contained the body of an ancient priest and had been sealed for over 2,500 years by this point. More than 100 old books, manuscripts, and documents, some 1,200 years old, were recently discovered in the attic of a church in Romania. The trove hadn't been touched in hundreds of years and contains lost information about Transylvania and its history. Here's a 2,000-year-old Roman silver dagger that was discovered last year by an archaeology intern in Germany, before and after 9 months of careful restoration work. In Tokyo, a massive ceramic jar containing thousands of coins was recently found in a 15th century home that once belonged to a samurai. A new geoglyph was discovered last year in the Nazca Desert, and it's the oldest one in the region. The 2,000-year-old artwork was overlooked for so long because the lines were badly faded over the years. But emerging AI technology is making it easier for archaeologists to discover new geoglyphs like this one. This newly discovered species of spiky crab was recently found in the depths of the eastern Caribbean Sea. Scientists estimate that about 90% of all life in the ocean, up to 10 million different species, still remain undiscovered to this day. These are some of the rarest graves in the world. In 2010, Nicolas Cage spent $61,000 on a pyramid-shaped grave for when he dies. The actor has chosen to remain silent about his reasoning for it, but many speculate it's a tribute to the National Treasure franchise. In Brooklyn's Greenwood Cemetery, there's a gravestone for a dog named Rex that died over 100 years ago. Instead of flowers, people bring sticks to his grave. Carved by himself in 1832, the headstone of John Rennie is an acrostic that reads, "Here lies John Rennie 46,000 different ways." This is the grave of H.R. Giger, the Swiss artist who designed the creatures for the movie Alien. Here's the gravestone of Elijah Bond, the man who invented the Ouija board. A father designed this headstone for his wheelchair-bound son, depicting him free of his earthly burdens. This is the incredible tombstone of Rudolf Nureyev, a Soviet man who's considered to be one of the greatest dancers of the 20th century. The grave was designed to look like a carpet, but it's made entirely of glass and bronze. Here are some of the weirdest things that you can do with your body after you die. If you have faith in future technology being able to revive people, you can pay $200,000 to have your body frozen in a chamber of liquid nitrogen. The Alcor Cryonics facility in Arizona currently holds over 100 deceased people, including MLB legend Ted Williams, who are all hoping to one day be brought back to life. If you want to go out in style, you can hire a cremation artist to turn your ashes into a galaxy orb like these ones. There's also a company that makes special urns which cast a shadow of your face so that your loved ones can feel like you're always with them. If you have tattoos and would like them to be preserved forever, you can pay to have parts of your skin cut off and framed. With a traditional burial, it can take the body up to 15 years to decompose. But biodegradable mushroom coffins will completely decompose your body within 4 to 6 weeks and allow you to become one with nature. If you're more of an ocean person, you can have your ashes turned into the base of an eternal coral reef. This way you can help coral reefs bloom and become a sustainable habitat for marine life. And if you're not a fan of keeping your body on Earth forever, you can pay a company called Celestis $2,500 to blast your ashes into orbit. A group of psychologists studied 400 different movies to find the most realistic psychopath. And the winner was Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men. They said that he appears to be effectively invulnerable to any form of humanity or emotion. Popular characters Hannibal Lecter and Patrick Bateman didn't even make the top 25. The actor who played Danny in The Shining didn't know it was a horror movie until after he was done with filming. He was led to believe that he was just filming a drama movie about a family that lives in a hotel. This was the original design for Voldemort, which many find far more terrifying than what they went with. While filming Poltergeist, the clown doll nearly killed Robbie Freeling when an animatronic error caused its arm to tighten around his neck. When the actor started gesturing that he couldn't breathe, Steven Spielberg thought he was just improv acting. Here are some disturbing facts about Halloween. On one October night in 1997, someone managed to impale a pumpkin on top of McGraw Tower at Cornell University. The tower is more than 170 feet tall, so no one knows how the prankster did it to this day. Many shelters don't allow black cats to be adopted around Halloween time out of fear that they'll be sacrificed or tortured. Cities across the US, registered sex offenders are required to keep their outdoor lights off during Halloween. In October of 2001, 14-year-old Caleb Rebb accidentally choked himself to death while working as a scare actor. He had tied a rope too tightly around his neck, and while he was struggling to untie it and screaming for help, no one helped him because they thought he was acting. Contrary to popular belief, there has never been a single case of kids being poisoned by Halloween candy from their neighbor. The only confirmed case involved a father who laced his own son's pixie sticks with cyanide in order to cash in on his life insurance. Here are some morbid facts about North Korea. This photo shows American college student Otto Warmbier begging for mercy in front of a North Korean court in 2015. He'd been visiting the country as part of a guided tour group and tried stealing a propaganda poster that was intercepted by airport security. 6 years later, he returned to the US in a vegetative state and died soon afterwards when his parents requested his feeding tube to be removed. North Korean hospitals are so underfunded that many operations are performed without anesthesia or antibiotics. To make matters worse, the same needles are often used for different patients, so a lot of people exit the hospital in worse shape than when they entered.